as a reward for developing certain techniques to prove the Gauss-Kornet theorem, namely the notion of degree as well as the full proof of the triangulation of a surface. So we shall get another important result here, which is again goes back to Hopf. The discussion of singularities of vector field is a topic. If you want to state the result, we will need some time. So I will first state this, start this discussion. As usual, start with a smooth surface in R3. Okay. By a vector field in V, vector field V in on S, we mean a smooth function defined on S into R3 such that the V of P, P is a point in S, so each Vp is a vector in R3. This vector should lie inside the tangent space to S at the point P. So this is the definition of vector field borrowed from physicists. The word field is used in the sense of, physicists here, not in the sense of mathematicians, not with your commutative algebra. Okay. So such thing is called a vector field. Often physicists will just use a field. It's like a field theory for a theorist, vector for a physicist is not what we know, Galois theory and so on. It's something quite different. The study of such functions. Okay. Of course, more generally, not just for surface. So a vector field is nothing but continuous, smooth, or whatever, something you have to assume. So here I am assuming smoothness, association of each point of a surface with a tangent at that point. Okay, the tangent vector. The tangent vector can be zero. There is no problem. The whole thing must be continuous, but I have actually taken smooth function because we have to go to derivatives and so on. By choosing a surface patch, now surface patch is a special case, namely you have a diffeomorphism sigma from a rectangular or a discular region, some region open subset of Rn, a convex region, not more general region in R2 into P, right? So you have a surface patch sigma around a given point P, just means that P should be inside the surface patch, that's all. So we can express V as alpha times sigma u plus beta times sigma v, because sigma u and sigma v span the tangent space. Okay. So you can write them as two scalar functions here. The scalar functions themselves will be functions, right? V is a function, V of u, V it is actually, or V of P. It's alpha P, sigma u at P, beta P, sigma V at P. That way you can write on. So where alpha, beta are smooth real valued functions defined again on the domain of the surface patch or wherever the vector field is defined or the intersection of the two things. Okay. The study of vector fields arose in the study of fluid dynamics. Sorry, fluid dynamics you can say, yeah. I mean, fluid dynamics includes study of gases also. And we therefore have a number of terminologies, enforced by these fluid dynamics. Okay, so you will see that, but we are not going in that direction. We are going into one single small object here, namely Hopf's theorem for vector fields. Okay, a smooth curve, say gamma in S, is called an integral curve for V if the derivatives of the curve, namely tangents to the curve. Gamma is a parameterization. You can take gamma dot. It must be equal to the vector V at gamma t. Okay. So then these curve will be called the integral curve for the vector field V. Okay, one integral curve passing through a given point. The first order solutions, existence and uniqueness of first order differential equations will tell you that there is always a small curve which is integral curve for any given vector field. Okay, especially if V is not zero at that point, then you get a real curve. Otherwise, it may be just a 0 point also. That is also possible. The integral curves are the track of particles in a fluid under motion whose velocity vector is represented by V. So instead of writing all the curves at all the points and so on, so the tangent field, this vector field is taken as the prototype of the study of fluid. The fluid under motion is represented by V. Okay. Of course, fluid dynamics, if you want to study, then you will have to bring out all the various properties of the fluid itself. Here, our fluid is extremely ideal fluid, namely R3 itself. Okay, point P belonging to S is called a stationary point if Vp is the zero tangent. Vp is zero. So stationary point again, as if the fluid is not moving at that point. So that's why the word stationary point is used for all the points wherein Vp is zero. Okay. So let me give you a very simple examples only, just to bring you up to what we are talking about. Just take R2 to R2, R2 to R3 I have to take, but R2 itself is a surface, right? R2 is surface inside R3. So what is the tangent vector? Tangent at any point is R2 itself. Therefore, I can write some function from x and R2 to R2, any smooth function will be a vector field on R2 as a surface, any smooth function. So let me give you a function here. All these functions are taken to be that example, one single example, wherein my surface itself is the plane Vxy equal to xy, Vxy equal to minus x minus y, Vxy equal to x comma minus y, Vxy equal to minus y comma x. Very simple example. So why do you want to study this one? The study of, as if you think of them as just very elementary linear maps there, right? One is identity map, other one is negative of the identity. This is a reflection, it's negative of the reflection. That's all. It's over. Study, why bother? The point of view of fluid dynamics brings entirely different flavor to the study here. So how do we represent the corresponding fluid picturesquely for these vector fields? The first one, I've drawn pictures here. The first one here is just represented like this. Say at point 1, 0, you are drawn the vector 1, 0, transported at that point. At the comma, this one, say 1, 1, it is the vector 1, 1. At comma 0, 1, it is a vector 0, 1. So this represents this picture represents the vector field xy equal to xy, vxy equal to xy. The minus of that, the second one is minus of that, right? Minus of that will be represented like this. Okay. The third one, just reflection looks quite unusual here. See, the fluid is along the y-axis, fluid is moving towards the origin. But from the origin, it is going away in the x-axis direction. So in between, what happens? It will be moving like that. Okay, you can write down the vector here, just the vector here. Okay, so it will be directed like this. This will be directed like this, and so on. So this is the vector field xy equal to x comma minus y. But the fourth one has an entirely different picture here. This is the negative of this one, vxy equal to minus y comma x, which is the most common tangent field that we have been using. Namely, on each circle, what is the tangent, the canonical tangent to at each point? At a point x comma y, the tangent, oriented tangent is minus y comma x, right? And that is the vector field. Automatically, the integral curves will be circles, oriented in the counterclockwise sense. Okay. So this is the vector field x y comma to minus y comma x, and so on. So in all these things, 0 is a stationary point. Okay, so that is obvious from these definitions, right? So one can go on giving many pictures here, not too many, another 4 or 5 of them will come. Each of them in fluid dynamics has a name. So I am not going into that. Let me just say this is called a source. This is called a sink. This is actually saddle point. This is a vortex. There are different types of vortices. If you get into this kind of things in a sea, then you are sunk. This will, water here will just pull you down into the center of vortex. Okay, so just like a 0 of a polynomial of 1 variable or 2 variable or whatever it is, or analytic function, we have the notion of multiplicity of a stationary point. All these stationary points here, they are all simple stationary points. Multiplicity 1. There can be multiplicity 2, 3, 4, minus 1, minus 2, and so on. So there will be many other multiplicities here. Okay. So let us introduce this notion of multiplicity. Start with any vector field A. So V, so let us say P1, P2, Pk are the finitely many zeros of V. So we are assuming this. Okay. In other words, I am assuming that each 0 is a singular point. This is not true in general. So I am assuming this one. Then you write A as V divided by norm A. That is by definition a unit vector field. Okay, make it a unit vector field. You can do this one only because at these points V is not 0, so norm V is not 0. Okay, once you have one non-zero vector field inside the tangent space, at that point you can always choose its normal inside the space. So that will be B. And you can then take A cross B as N. So this way you can extend this one to a frame. Okay. Do this. There are choices, namely B, you can choose starting with B itself or minus B itself. Okay. Once you have one norm, minus of that will be also a norm to normal to A, right? Perpendicular to A. So A, B or A minus B will also do, but then N will be unique. This N has to be taken as A cross B. Okay. So start with an orthonormal frame like this, produced out of the given vector field at the points wherein they are not, this is not zero, only those points. Okay. Let us take sigma I from D2 to S, a surface patch around this Pi. Okay. Because every point is covered by a surface patch. That is the definition of the surface segment. Put gamma T equal to sigma I of the unit circle, e power it. Okay, so this is the definition of gamma T defined from 0 to 1. 0 to e power it I have written, not 2 pi, so 0 to 2 pi. Okay, write gamma dot T equal to cos phi t A plus sin phi t B. This is the usual game that we have been doing in the proof of what? Hoff's Umlauf-Sass, and then finally we use this one to prove the Gauss-Bonnet theorem also. So do the same thing as in Gauss-Bonnet theorem, preparation of Gauss-Bonnet theorem, that was our lemma 2.9. Okay. Having written this one, you just define IPI of V, namely this is called the index of V at the point Pi. This to be 1 divided by 2 pi integral of this phi dot along the curve gamma. We know that this is a multiple of 2 pi by an integer. That integer is got here because I am dividing by 1 by 2. Okay, so this is an integer now. It may be positive, it may be 0, it may be negative, whatever. Okay, so this integer is called the index of V at the point Pi. You can call it a multiplicity also. Okay. As in the lemma 2.1, one can verify that IPV is independent of the choice of sigma I. No matter what you choose, we have to start with the vector field and then A is no choice. After that what? Minus B plus B, you have to choose whatever. Then there is also why you should take only unit field. There is no need. Sigma I could be very different. So it is independent of all these choices, comes from just glancing around this 2.9. I am not going through this one. Okay. In any case, some kind of invariance will automatically come once we prove the final theorem here. So wait for that. Okay, so I say it can be verified that this is independent of the choice of sigma I. Okay, this is not difficult. Let now S be a compact surface and V be a vector field with finitely many stationary points. This is the hypothesis, okay? Start with the vector field. It may not have only finite limit, it may have several zeros. If it has no zeros, then it is fine. So this set is empty. Okay. That is also a thing, a rare thing, but that is included. Then we define the total index of V is like a total multiplicity to be the sum of all these multiplicities. It's a finite sum. Okay. So this finite sum, which is called the total index, this will enter into the Hoff's theorem now. Any questions? Is the definition of IV clear? Now, given a vector field on a surface, following the technique of moving slightly, we have used this one, remember, okay, to get a triangulation, right? You can choose any triangulation G of S, okay, such that all the stationary points of V lie inside the interior of some triangles. There are finitely many of them. Suppose one of the point lies on the curve G itself. That means on one of the vertices or on the edge. Then you can slightly move that edge. We know that one, and we know that trick. Okay, you have to do the finitely many. What is the involved thing here? Some blah 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 is, set of bad points, critical values, blah blah blah. It's a measure zero set. So you have to move. You have plenty of room to move away. Very slight movement of this one can be ensured to have this property, namely, all the points will be inside the interior of triangles now. Okay. What you do is start with a vector field, start with a triangulation. Given that triangulation, you can slightly vary it to get a triangulation with the desired property. Once you have got that all the points are inside some triangle means not one triangle, several of them. Any one of some triangle, but they are not on the boundary of this triangle. That's all I want to say. Now it may happen that one of the triangle contains more than one point. Okay. So that creates combinatorial difficulty. So what we will do? We will cut that triangle into two different triangles so that these 2 points are in a different, that's very easy to do. Different triangles now. So keep cutting as many times as necessary to make that every triangle will contain at most one point P1, P2, Pk, wherein the vector field is 0. The stationary points are inside triangles, but no two of them are inside the same triangle. So once that property is assured, we would say G is well chosen with respect to the vector field V. Okay. So we have now made all the basic background needed. Of course, the statement of this theorem doesn't involve any of that. Only the proof will need all that. The statement of the theorem just needs the definition of IV and the definition of chi-S. Chi-S we have defined last time. By choosing any triangulation, take the Euler characteristic of the triangulation and call it chi-S. Okay. Gauss-Bonnet theorem tells you that it is independent of the choice of the triangulation. Okay, now we get another thing. This total index of such a vector field is equal to chi-S. Now this time no pi, no 2 pi, no 4 pi, divided by 4, nothing. IV is chi-S. So this is Hopf's index theorem. Okay. Proof is very easy because we have done all the necessary theorem, necessary preparations. Now you see the right hand side is independent of the vector field, right? Left hand side sum total will be equal to this one, which just means that it is independent of any vector field like this. For all those vector fields, this will be the same. Not only it is independent of the surface patches and so on. The sum total, you get invariance. Individually, at each point, whether index is invariant of the choice of sigma I, that we have not proved, but I said it can be proved. Okay, so that is the meaning of I'm saying that sum total verification is easy to as a consequence of this, right? So let us prove this one. That will be the last result for this course in geometry. Begin with a well-chosen triangulation G of S. We have witnessed how to do that one. Let P1, P2, Pk be the stationary points of V, and Pi's are interior of Ti. Ti's are distinct disjoint triangles. Okay. This disjointness is not necessary. Distinct is enough, actually. Put S1 equal to all those T1, T2, Ti up to Tk, where P1, P2, Pk's appear. There may be other Ti's, other Tj's. Take all of them and put them as S2. The union of all the triangles is among a surface. Therefore, S2, S1 itself is equal to S2 is S minus all the triangles. Sorry, S2 is S minus all the other triangles. Okay, so these triangles I have removed. So S minus these triangles, so other triangles will be here. So S2 is the union of all the other triangles. In other words, S1 union S2 is the whole of S, right? Therefore, now they are distinct triangles of a triangulation don't overlap, right? We have used this in Gauss-Bonnet theorem also. We are using it now also. 2 pi chi is equal to the area integral of K, the curvature. This is Gauss-Bonnet theorem. Okay, so you can write it as sum over S1 plus sum over S2. Okay, very simple-minded arithmetic here. Now we will examine each of these things separately. S1, summation over S1, summation over S2. Okay. On the surface minus the point P1, P2, Pk, we have A equal to V by norm V we can take and extend the whole thing to a normal frame. Okay. From 13, namely Green's theorem, which we have used earlier, integral of kappa on this surface patch, on the union of all these triangles, this is the union of some triangle, it is equal to A dot B dot integral on the boundary of these triangles. I can write it as boundary of S2 now, because common edges between two adjacent triangles, the integral cancels out. Okay, so that's why I get only the boundary of S2 here. It is sum total of all the triangles here, but on the intermediary edges, the integral cancels out. Okay, so S2 part has this expression A dot B dot. This is just Green's theorem, which we have used earlier. Okay, for each I equal to 1, 2, 3 up to K, now I am coming to S1. Choose any frame. You see, this ABN is not valid at the point P1, P2, Pk, right? Because it's not defined there. So I have to choose a different set of frames here. AI, BI, NI on TI. This is possible because each triangle is contained in a surface patch. So I can start with a sigma V, sigma U, sigma U, sigma V, orthonormalize it and get this frame. So this is possible. This is not a hypothesis. Okay. For this, use the fact that TIs are contained in a surface patch and they are mutually disjoint. Okay. so that there is no clash between Ti and Tj. That's what we wanted to say. Okay, it looks like this is mutually disjointness is also necessary, but again, if you think carefully, it is not necessary. We then have, again by the Green's theorem applied to each Ti and then taking the summation, integral of, here I am not taking summation, integral on each Ti, integral of Ti, integral on Ti of kappa is equal to integral on the boundary of Ti, namely Ai dot Bi's. Okay, so Green's theorem is used in this one for both the parts. Now what happens is the oriented curves, Ti's, the boundary of Ti's. See, remember this we have been using all the time. If you take two adjacent triangles, okay, with a common edge E, on one orientation, whatever orientation we get, will be the opposite from the other side. So in the integration theory, this common edge, integration on this common edge cancels out. Right? So as a oriented boundary, we can always cancel out or you can include both of them. No problem in this summation. The union of boundary Ti, when I say, either those common things are deleted or both of them are there with sign, correct sign. If that is the case, that is equal to minus of the boundary of S2. Okay, which is the rest of the things. The sum total is 0 because each edge will occur exactly twice, with once with one operation, one orientation, another time the opposite orientation. All right. So we have this elementary fact about triangulations here. Okay, this has to be understood in the light of integration. Integration of any smooth function on this side is equal to integration of this one in the same function with the negative sign. That is the meaning of this one. So you can write this equality at least for the integration purposes. Now you use whatever we have done so far, 2 pi chi s, we wrote it as sum of two different things. Each of them I used the Green's theorem to write it in this way, but I am using the fact that the integration on one of them is negative of the integration here. Okay, I can write the same boundary of Ti instead of S2, I throw away S2, but I can write it as minus boundary of Ti. So integration over minus boundary of Ti's will come here with a negative sign here. Then you take the summation. So now we are only, the entire thing is localized around the zeros of stationary points P1, P2, Pn and triangles around them. Okay, the rest of the surface is thrown out. This thing is valid. Okay, remember A dot B dot, this ABN, it is valid excepted P1, P2, Pk in the entire surface. So it is valid on the boundaries of the triangles. There is no problem. So we have got this 2 pi chi s is equal to this integral. Okay. From this one, we have to only interpret what it is, just like we have interpreted the angle. Okay. So that is what it is. Let gamma I be any unit speed simple closed curve in Ti going around Pa. Okay, now I am taking a smooth curve inside the triangle. What I am claiming here is, we have seen this also. This integral A dot Bi on the boundary is the same thing as integral of the same thing on the curve itself. Okay. So from each boundary of Ti, I am moving inside and I am choosing a smooth curve there. So let these be unit speed simple smooth curves in Ti going around Pi. By 7 applied to each of these Ti, we have A dot B. Remember this formula, A dot B dot is the Gaussian curvature of Gi, of gamma I minus theta I dot. Okay, similarly, AI dot BI dot, I have to take phi I dot corresponding formula. So this is with respect to A and B, A, B, N. This is with respect to AI, BI, NIs. Okay, so these are Gaussian curvatures of the corresponding gamma I's. Okay, this is valid for each I 1, 2, 3 up to K, right? So if you substitute these things here, what do we get? This minus this, kg of gamma I cancels out, right? So what we are left out here, this one is nothing but integral of boundary of Ti. Instead of that, integral of on the smoothly chosen curve gamma I of this theta phi I dot minus theta I dot. Okay, so what are these? What is this difference? This is what I have to do. Okay, so what is theta I? Remember, theta I is the angle subtended by gamma I dot, the tangent vector to the curve on which we are taking the integration, with the frame, the first member of the frame, A. So A gamma dot I, the angle measured from gamma A to gamma I dot, okay, in the direction of B. So that is the meaning of this theta I. Similarly, phi I is angle measured from AI to gamma I dot in the direction of BI. Okay. So what is the difference? Phi I minus theta I. This will be angle measured of angle made by AI with respect to A, from A to AI, right? So that is phi I minus theta I. So dots of those things integrated will give you the total of this difference. So these are the orientation angles respectively. So therefore, phi I is nothing but AI to A, okay, angle made by A with respect to AI, okay, that is phi I minus theta. Okay, so we are interested in the totality of this phi I, right? Integral of phi I dot. So 2 pi I PIV is by definition, remember, is, if you don't write 2 pi, it is the index definition. 1 divided by 2 pi you have to do. I have multiplied by 2 pi, so it is just the integral of this psi I dot, which is phi I dot minus theta I dot. Okay, but that is equal to boundary of Ti phi I dot minus theta I dot. Okay, by homotopy here. Okay, this part doesn't need any computation. I mean, any smoothness part here. So that is equal to what we have already seen, is integral of boundary Ti ai dot bi dot minus a dot b dot. When you take the sum of all these, that is precisely 2 pi chi s. So 2 pi cancels out. What we get is Hopf's theorem. So you can ask any questions if you have. Okay, so here is a remark here, namely for your future. Given a compact smooth surfaces with a nowhere vanishing vector field, the above theorem tells you that chi s must be 0 because you are taking the sum over empty set. Index is over an empty set, right? So chi-s must be 0. So this is a consequence of, if you have a nowhere vanishing vector field, the Euler characteristic must be 0. Remember, compact smooth surface. We have proved it for only that. It's an easy consequence of Hofstadter's theorem. But the converse of this is also true. Not only that, this is true for every compact manifold in all the dimensions. The proofs are not that easy. Okay, neither they are very difficult. They are all called Hof's theorem because Hof has laid down the foundations for these things. Even in a higher dimension, he has indicated how to prove these things and so on. As far as compact surfaces in R3 are concerned, the Euler number has another role to play. Namely, it determines their diffeomorphism type. After that, only geometry is left. Okay. Like if the Euler characteristic is 2, then it must be homeomorphic, actually diffeomorphic to S2, the standard unit sphere. The standard unit sphere and an ellipsoid, they have different geometries. Okay, but they are diffeomorphic. Once things are diffeomorphic, the differential topology stops there. The differential geometry enters into picture. In this slide, what I would like to say is, every differential geometer should first of all understand differential topology first. Otherwise, he will have his knowledge will be gap even within differential geometry. Okay. The standard result is a standard result with how to classify how the diffeomorphism type of a surface inside R3 gets classified. Okay, for this you may look into my elementary book S3. I have written down here, that is differential topology. Okay. So I can go on say, the Euler characteristic always makes one feel very enthusiastic. For example, in this book, I have given you 6 different definitions of Euler characteristic. Okay. The Hof's theorem can be taken as a definition of Euler characteristic. You see, this is chi v equal to chi s. Right? This is one definition here. So in this course, we have seen, you can say we have another one as theorem, whatever. So if you have any more comments or questions, you can ask now. We have plenty of time now. What is the time? We are here, I mean, the college or two colleges which continue to, call this year. And I think because cash is something department versus department the principals according to their
Okay, so Professor Shastri, thank you for everything that you have done for this program. Uh,
Excuse me, I can't hear.
oh,
Hello?
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Okay. Well, so anyway, I was just thanking you for everything that you've done for this program, for agreeing so readily to be part of it and for helping us organize the entire topology course, helping us get instructors uh, and associate faculty. And and for your very nice set of lectures, all the trouble that you have taken for these slides and it.
Since the recordings will be there, so not only these set of participants, other people later on can also access them, I hope.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think one has to decide to what extent, but certainly if you are willing to share.
No, I think the NCM always puts all these things so that, in their website, so that the lectures are available. They usually ask permissions from the,
Right.
yeah, I think they will do that. Anyway, from my side, I thank Amber and Satya for their nice cooperation. First of all, their invitation to participate in this one and give me a chance to, update these slides. There are quite a few typos which I noticed. Some of them I noticed while lecturing and so on. But right now, I have sufficiently few typos. The typos will still be there because every time I type, I introduce more typos. Uh, so,
Well, if one writes something completely perfect, then there's nothing for the reader to do. So you have to
yeah,
give them something to do also.
so this the latest version. I will send it to you in an half an hour after this one.
Okay.
So Satya can take care to post it. Okay. So this will be the latest version for this course.
Sure.
Yeah.
That is lecture is over.